Well, good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, everyone. Hello, and welcome to this SFIA 8 beta launch webinar. I'm Daniel Marriott, one of the members of the SFIA Design Authority. This is the second of 3 webinar sessions we're running at various times around the world so that our global user base can access a convenient time for them. We'll do introductions in just a second. We'll be using the Q&A feature in Zoom for any questions, so please feel free to raise any questions as we go. We'll try and answer those as we go through the session material, and we've also got other members of the Design Authority that are on hand to help, and will be helping with responding to those questions. We will collate all the questions from each session and send them out to all attendees. We'll also be recording this session, and we'll make the recordings available very shortly afterwards. So we really welcome your feedback. And at that point, I'm going to hand over to Ian, who'll just introduce us and get us underway.
Thank you, Daniel. I would just like to introduce the Design Authority members. It's an international group. We have Louise Smith from Australia. We have Daniel, who you've just heard, Daniel Marriott from New Zealand, Ralph Gockel from Germany, Miroslav Pavlovic from Chile, Matthew Burrows from the UK. We have Peter Leather, the update manager, Grant Nicholson from Australia, and Andy Thompson, who chairs the SFIA Council. So moving on to talk a little bit about this webinar. We have a varied audience. Some will be SFIA experts with long-term use of SFIA under their belt. Some will be relatively new to SFIA. And of course, we also have some who are just interested in knowing about SFIA or knowing about what the SFIA Foundation is actually doing. This webinar is intended to provide a summary of the SFIA 8 beta and indeed the activities that are going on around taking that through to a released version. It is not a deep dive into individual changes or content, and while it will touch on the additional SFIA assets for illustration, the focus is intended to be informative about what SFIA 8 beta is and give you an opportunity to find out where you can get that information and indeed how you can provide feedback. So moving on to the update process itself. SFIA has a long history, dating back over 20 years, but we update every 3 years. The industry is ever more quickly changing, and any longer than 3 years and a framework would get very stale. SFIA is a story of evolution from the start, and our changes reflect how industry develops. And over the years, we provided more and more areas of development and support for what is turned out to be a global ecosystem. So we now translate into 11 languages for SFIA 7 with 2 more in preparation. We follow industry developments. We look at specific industry themes. We've built the infrastructure to support the ecosystem. We link to bodies of knowledge, something like 47, I think it is now. We've developed SFIA views. We add guidance. We have a number of collaborations with other organizations. We've provided some guidance on role profiles, and we try and satisfy what the industry wants. So SFIA is built by industry for industry. One of the key roles of the Design Authority is to make sure that as SFIA evolves, it still maintains its original objectives of satisfying what industry needs and fits into the context so that we check the beta, if you like, or the new version of SFIA back against the reasons, the design principles that underpin SFIA. So moving on to the consultation process. Essentially what we do is we find out what industry wants, we work out the options for what SFIA can do to solve those, to address those issues, and then we check back with industry through testing and the beta release. We find out what industry wants through all sorts of mechanisms. Themes, we look at industry themes. These are really important because they give us an opportunity to crawl over the whole framework looking at a particular theme. It is very important to do a complete refresh when you're looking at a subject as a whole. We run a number of workshops. We've had workshops in a number of countries on a number of topics where people have come together and aired their views about what they want to see in SFIA and how things should change. We take direct input from industry and end users. We take dialogue with the various industry bodies. There is, of course, the SFIA Council that provides input, and many people go via that route. And we also have input from the SFIA Design Authority, learning from SFIA 7, simple research and watching trends, and of course, if you like, the formality of change requests. The options for what we can do is essentially three. We can change the SFIA framework, and we'll illustrate some of those in a moment. We can develop a SFIA view of how the framework is used, and we can provide guidance to help those people use the framework. And of course, we can choose to do nothing, and we generally try and explain why. So that results in either an update to the core framework, which in this case will be SFIA 8, or the development of areas of in what we call tools and resources. SFIA is built by volunteers. We have various working groups, as I say, but ultimately the design authority actually debate this and determine the best way forward. But a key element of SFIA throughout has been visibility. You can see it being built, and an example of that is it's on the website, has been being developed for months, and we provide monthly newsletters. So moving on to the timeline. So where we are is the end of June. This is the beta launch. A lot of activity has gone on over the last 14 months or so to arrive at where we are. We now go into the period of beta where you have an opportunity to provide feedback. We value that feedback. Please tell us what you like and also tell us what you don't like. It's important to have the feedback of what you like as well. We will go, the end of beta will be in the middle of August, when we will freeze what we have, and we will then finalize that for release in September. Whilst you are providing feedback, we will be doing a number of things. Yes, some active testing where we actually go out and try and get extra feedback. We will be maintaining the change log, which is the best place to find out where things are and what the status of them is. We will be working on the navigation of SFIA, so finalizing the categories, subcategories, views, and we will be working out the design and production of the supporting materials, like the downloads that will be available. The other thing we do is kick off the translations, which is, I say, is now running at around 13 languages. So let's move on to the purpose of the beta. So the reason for the beta is quite simple. We want your feedback, what you like, what you don't like. There has been some extension to scope of SFIA and some content is changed, so we want you to take a look at that and comment. Their individual skills have changed to some degree, many have not, but some have changed and some names have changed. We have undertaken a massive piece of work to improve the readability of SFIA, which will be talked about shortly. And of course, we also want the basic stuff, if you like, of proofreading, spelling, grammar, punctuation. The other purpose of beta is to provide early sight of SFIA 8 for everyone. In particular, yes, you could see it being built over the last 14 months or so, but this is the first time you can probably see it all together as a coherent framework. employers, partners, and other users may need to plan what they want to do in adopting the next version of SFIA. And so it gives them a bit of time to think about that. So we will now work on the refresher presentation and the supporting assets. We'll initiate the translations. But the main thing to be aware of is it is a beta. That means some things may change prior to launch, and indeed some bits may not be launched. So how can you provide feedback? The obvious easiest way is an email to updates@sfia-online.org. You can use that if you can't find something, or you have a specific question, or you want to provide some feedback. You can raise a change request, as you've always been able to raise a change request, but for the purposes of beta, please limit that to suggestions regarding the beta, and please include the 4-letter code in the title if you can. That helps us to collate those changes. And of course, there may well be detailed comments on the content of skills, which may include typos, grammar, etc., which may be most easily done by marking up a Word document. And we are making available both a Word document and an Excel of the beta. And then obviously email that to updates@sfia-online.org. We are planning to arrange a number of deep dive web meetings over the next few weeks, and we will send out information about those as and when. So now, without further ado, I'll hand over to Peter Leather, who is our update manager. He has been pulling all of this input from various sources together, the work of the volunteers, the working groups, the change requests, into what is now the SFIA 8 beta release. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Ian, and hello to everyone. Just to build on what Ian said there, huge thanks to everyone who's taken part in this volunteer activity. It never ceases to amaze me how much time and effort people are willing to put into helping us do this, and it it really distinguishes SFIA as a community asset that we're building. And I can see from the participant list, many of the people on the call have put in lots of time and effort to help us. So thank you very much to them and everyone else. So what I wanted to talk about first is we're quite keen with all releases of SFIA, going back to the early days, we're now looking at SFIA 8, is always to have an evolutionary path. Because we have a heritage of people using SFIA and organizations using it, we don't want to be having great step changes or leaps in direction between versions. It needs to be a smooth path to ensure people are using it now, can recognize what SFIA is going to in the future. So we've termed that evolution, not revolution. Sorry, now I've gone backwards. Here we are. So I'm going to cover a couple of aspects of this and just anecdotally really on these slides, and we'll get into some of the detail further on. But this picture here is just trying to illustrate some of the incidents which we count as evolution, and it's also given me a chance to use one of the PowerPoint slides that I've never found a use for before, but this seemed to work quite well for this. So let me just pick a few examples, and I say just purely illustrations, but hopefully you'll get the essence of what I'm getting at with evolution. So some of the skill areas that we've added into SFIA 8 have come from areas where they're partly using SFIA, so parts of the industry may also already have their skills recognized in SFIA. But when they're looking at that and they're keen to use SFIA, they like the levels 1 to 7, the structure of SFIA, the overall content, but they're saying, well, actually, it would be even better if, we could find some additional skills that reflect what we're doing, or some of the issues or opportunities we have in our discipline. So we looked at the security, for example, where SFIA currently recognizes security, and there's a lot of information, and there already has been lots of information security. We've had some volunteers, security experts plowing through industry frameworks and saying, if we were trying to map to an overall security framework, there's some skills that may not be skills typically found in SFIA's normal user base, but in specialist SFIA security organizations. So is there a way we can plug those in and harmonize what they would use into the SFIA structure? So I've illustrated that with a, the security one represented half in SFIA 7 already, but an opportunity to extend that outwards into some of the other skill areas. The computational science one is one, I guess, with less overlap and quite a specialized area, but this one be focused on research scientists or scientists, using particular applications of skills in order to do their day jobs. So the weather forecasting or nuclear science industry, things like that. Now, what they've looked at is saying, actually, the moment how that might be represented in SFIA would be only about the people who come and put the PCs on our desk or do the networking for us. But if we can extend what SFIA's got to some of the skills that our scientists use, then we've got something that's really powerful for us as an organization. So that one has less overlap. And I guess in the initial days of SFIA 8, there'll be less organizations who say, no, we can go and use those skills. But it sits there as something that gives us a chance to extend. And the design of SFIA is that not everyone has to use that skill. It's available, but the way you use SFIA is to pick and choose based on your own organizational or personal needs. And we've got some tools to help you do that as well. Similar thing applies there with data science. I won't go through any details there, but it's a similar extension into some areas that would not be typically SFIA users who want to pick up on the framework. And a couple of other examples, the privacy one, where we have that covered with a few bullet points under a skill called information governance. But as we're seeing in the industry and jobs which specialize around personal data protection, but not the rest of what's in information governance. So in order to support them, we're suggesting we bubble out from that skill a distinct set of responsibilities around privacy. And we've got a new skill called personal data protection to cover that. And that has some overlap in the security world as well. So that's another example of evolving what we've got in the model. And then as an opposite of that would be where we've got, we had a skill called system software. That's been a long-lived SFIA skill. But as the nature of the IT infrastructure has evolved, we're seeing an opportunity that maybe that has actually got a lot in common with the rest of what we've got in IT infrastructure, and that it would help to not draw a distinct distinction between the two. So that would help people who are doing some of the elements described in system software to be seen as part of a whole. So that's another element of evolution. And then just before I leave this slide, the unconnected bubbles are sort of a flag for the future. We know, and there's always continued interest in stretching SFIA into other areas. There's always a balancing act of when and how do we take advantage of that, or if we take advantage of those. But there's no doubt that the interest in SFIA is continually growing, and so for future releases of SFIA, some of those bubbles will come closer and start to overlap, and no doubt we'll start to build in some support for those other parts of the related industries. So that's evolution around the core content. And then what we've done with SFIA 8, so this is not something we normally put a big effort into, but it's around the readability of the framework. And what we're trying to do here is to make it SFIA as easy to use as we can for existing SFIA users and also new or potential SFIA users. So we think we can put a lot of effort into what the wording looks like and how we structure the actual content rather than the description of the skills. And in that way, we can, with the increased use of the web to access SFIA instead of the paper or the PDF documents, we can help provide a really useful way to navigate around and understand what's in SFIA and use it in the ways that people are trying to, for their own personal use. There's so many different uses of SFIA, and we find out about them, new ones constantly. So we can't be too prescriptive. SFIA is always available as an open resource. People can grab the text and put it into different formats they want to use. So we're not stopping that at all. We're trying to encourage that. But mainly what we're talking about is how we can use the assets that the SFIA Foundation looks after, primarily the website. So as an example of evolution, so what we've got here is the SFIA 7 skill description for systems design, and just highlighted some of the things that are on the website, including the recently added related skills. So those are things that really help a navigation around the framework without having to go top down through a hierarchy of skills. And what we're planning for SFIA 8 is something that looks very similar. So it's recognizably the same, still got lots of the common features around it. But what we've done in the middle is take out at the top, we have a long, quite wordy overall description of what systems design is. And what we're doing is saying, let's split that out, have a very short, sharp sentence that explains what we mean by systems design. So that's an instantly recognizable thing for people browsing the framework and wanting to find out what skills are relevant. And then we can take some of the detail that's in that top paragraph and make it into something we're now calling guidance notes. The idea of making it separate is then up to users, whether browsing the website or people who are accessing the material for their own tools and documents, to decide how they want to deploy that extra bit. So it gives a bit more flexibility in use of the content. And just give another example around here. This is the data modeling design, where we're saying there's a paragraph describing what data modeling design is. When we looked into what those words are, they are effectively describing the scope of what the skill's about. In many of them, we give examples of how it might be applied. So again, we just think it's useful to pull that out, retain the content that's in that paragraph, but make it a bit simpler and easy to use. It's still, the guidance notes still retain, and they're not necessarily saying, this is a new way of using SFIA. It's just a way of reformatting information that we've got already. For some of the skills, we have added some additional information into the guidance notes, mainly driven by feedback and experience of skills where there's potentially misunderstandings or other similarly named or similar skills close in scope, so we can add some guidance to help people in applying it. So the main purpose, help people select the relevant skills, choose between similar skills, and understand the scope of the skill. So that's another example of the sort of evolution, not revolution. And one benefit we got, it's kind of an aside benefit, an unintended benefit, is that when we're looking at people browsing the entire framework, because we've now got a very short, sharp description, it's much easier on the web pages, and particularly for mobile devices, to have a nice short description that helps people before they click. They can say, okay, is solution architecture what I need? Well, that's what describes it, and then I can click on it if I need it or not. So it gives a nice, neat way of helping people browse and find what they want. I think there will be other benefits we can get from these shorter descriptions as well, but we'll leave that as we go through. So I'm going to go to some of the detail of the changes. Let me just pause there and say, there's anything that from the Q&A that we need to be doing, or shall I just continue?
I think we've got the questions well handled, Peter.
So let's look at where we are with the readability. So we've got the guidance notes added to most skills, and then the actual content of the skill descriptions. So we've made a systematic editing of what's in there, and reduced any of the very long sentences. So the ones where we've got 30+ words, and they've all of them have been removed or restructured. So there's no sentences left in the skill descriptions which are more than 30 words. Our next benchmark was things that are over 20 words, so they're sometimes okay, depending on what the sentence is about, but we've reduced those quite dramatically from, I think it was, I can't, around 20-odd% down to about 2%. So what you'll see in the skill descriptions is the same content or the same intent of each skill, but fewer words, shorter sentences, easy to read, easy to understand, and easier to translate. So that's the outcome we're getting from the readability. On the content, so we've got quite a new, a large number of new skills, as sort of illustrated by my bubble diagram. So we've got 23 additional skills. Within there, there's 5 skills that are being replaced. So there's a net 18 plus 18. And then we've had a smaller number of skills renamed, which we think will help either clarity in terms of what they're covering, or they're catching up with what industry terminology might be. So an example there, we had a skill called security administration. That's been around for some time. But when we're looking around it in terms of the terminology used and the way the skill is perceived, it felt appropriate to say, let's rename that one security operations, and that gives a better sense and feel about what it is in terms of how that skill is perceived and used. Within the skills, we've got 24 levels have been added. So that's where we're fleshing out within a skill, either additional levels going upwards or downwards. And then we have some examples where we've moved some of the skills and sort of restructured them, so taking out some of the skill levels from one skill to another, but essentially kept the same content. So that's a summary. The next couple of slides, I'm just going to give an overview of some of the changes. As Ian mentioned, we have a wide audience, so some of these will be of pressing interest to some, and some of them will be of no interest to others. So I'm going to have to try and get the balance right and just give a sense of what's in there. And if some of these areas you really are interested in, and I'm not given the detail, then it's a chance to go to the change log, track down the changes through there and what's on the site. And that's the idea. Hopefully we'll get some feedback or questions, queries on what's in there. That'll be really useful. So I've already talked about computational science, data science. So this is an example where we're stretching out into some roles that who need skills that may not have been found in SFIA. And also an area where when we've been talking to organizations who are recruiting data scientists or building their capability around data science, wanting to have some more distinction between some of the broader set of skills we might have described within the skill called analytics. So we're trying to break that out and give a bit more granularity to help people. Also recognizing some areas around the actual building data flows and the data source that underpin data science and analytics was kind of hidden away within some parts of SFIA, and so that felt, let's bring something out separately called data engineering to help that. And the idea being that we can then attract or other users who wouldn't be able to use SFIA because it only partially covered what they need, we can harmonize them on using SFIA. I've covered security already. Business analysis. So this is an example where an opportunity to provide some more distinction between a single skill called business analysis, which covered a number of dimensions, and in a way from a business analyst perspective, there was concern that it sort of downplayed their broader role, that it was too easy to say, I'm a business analyst, therefore you need the business analysis skill, without really understanding what was underneath that and what other skills might be applied. So we're experimenting there with splitting that out and trying to give some distinction there to help job profiles, recruitment assessment, personal development planning. The investment appraisal. Now this is something that's closely related to lots of the skills in SFIA around business change, and portfolio management and the financial management one. But on a sort of deep dive into it, we could see that the elements around creating that appraisal, primarily financial appraisal around investments, wasn't actually covered. So that may be a skill that can be used appropriately in the right roles. The service catalogue manager is a good example where, through mapping to the newer version of ITIL, which we've done, we were able to see that there's some gaps in there. Although really good coverage across most of ITIL, it's felt that was an area that we could do something more specific on and support the processes around service catalogue management. So that's what that was about. Now, we've always, the area of people and skills, obviously really key to SFIA, given the nature of what SFIA is about. So over time, there's more things being added around people and skills. And those kind of come from two directions. One, the HR, people management processes and tools and techniques that might be used. but then also a growing interest within the technology teams themselves in terms of how they manage their workforce and how they manage their teams and how they encourage them to organize themselves in prioritizing and managing their own work, whether that's in formal agile teams or related activities around there. So we've tried to build on that and saying we've refreshed the skill. It was called performance management, which is more the traditional skill around organizing teams, setting objectives, supporting individuals to perform as required, to something that's more around their experience. So as organizations trying to attract and retain talent, it's really important that people want to stay and work there. And therefore, we need to build something that says, how do we provide an experience that really works for employees? For some organizations, that will be done by the same role who's doing the performance management. Other organizations have different models, and we recognize you can have practice leaders, or you can have some of the models like the Spotify way of working, where there's cross horizontal roles that come and pick up how employees are working. Large consultancies would work into that space as well. So try and have something flexible. It's not a requirement that says if you've got a team leader role, you have to deploy both of those skills. It's more putting out some options and letting people pick and choose. The agile teams, we have used many of the SFIA skills to support roles like Scrum Master and Agile Coach. But what we've tried to put together here is something that really puts a bit more specific detail in how that might work and how they can help teams develop. Again, not specifying who should be using that skill, but making it available so that it can be in the pack of SFIA skills, and where people find it useful, they'll be able to do that. And then we have had a look at, particularly around, we had a single skill called resourcing, which described within it recruitment, resource deployment, and also some elements of workforce planning. On consideration, when we think about some of the roles involved, it's not necessarily the same people who do all of those, or the same jobs who do all of those. So we wanted to bring out workforce planning. And the side effect that is such an important skill for anyone using SFIA, in order planning the skills required and the skills and capabilities and the numbers of people. It's really useful to have that. So that's been added in there. And digital badging, anyone will recognize how the prevalence of that over the last few years. And again, it's a closely related area to SFIA. Many organizations wanting to use SFIA as a basis for their certification schemes or badging schemes. So we've created something which describes the skills underpin that. And I think that, again, sort of mutually supportive with SFIA's scope, as well as being of interest to the broad industry. The last two, so business administration. Now this is an interesting one, because it's a skill that obviously in and around the teams, the technology teams, and a key enabler. And that's really been brought in because we recognize there's organizations who are using SFIA, not necessarily just for their IT teams or the technology teams, but they want to be able to include some of the roles who work alongside them in the SFIA framework. So we wanted to add something in for there. And in doing that, we've stretched it up to more senior leadership levels to reflect some roles who may be typically seen supporting leadership teams or individual CIOs, CEOs type roles to help them with running an effective business or business area. And then the final one, this is teaching has always been around in SFIA. Obviously something that's fairly niche and aimed at academic and related institutions. But when we had a look at it from a readability front, we realized there were some opportunities to actually stretch this and split it out a bit. Because some roles do teaching, some roles, and some of the roles who do teaching also play a part in creating curriculum, what the subjects are going to be taught, but not all teachers do that. So it was an opportunity to make that distinction between how that skill is deployed. So we've split that into two, and actually, having looked at it, increased some of the levels. So it now stretches from opportunities at entry-level teachers all the way through to program directors in academic institutions. So much more breadth and depth in that. So that's around some of the content. So that's only an overview. There'll be some areas that you want to explore further. Now, one area that is a different way of looking at in SFIA. So we had a request to look at how soft skills and behaviours were represented in SFIA, and there was a great piece of work led on this with volunteer activity, including input from the SFIA Council. Discussions have been going on this for around 12 months to look at the best way to do that. And the current position is we're looking at saying within the SFIA generic attributes, we have a number of descriptors that can be collated, presented in a different way that then highlights the behavioural factors that are actually in there. Now, we did have discussions about whether SFIA should generate its own behavioural framework, and we felt that wasn't quite right thing to do. But what we can do here is help users who don't have their own behavioural framework. So, for example, many small, medium-sized enterprises wouldn't have that, but they can then have an easy way to understand how SFIA represents that. So we think there's great mileage in this, and the documents are on the website available to look at. And what we're going to look at is how to present those in a way that really works, but without making them a compulsory or mandatory part of the framework. It's a different way of using what we've got in there. So I mentioned the changelog. So this is available from the website. The link from the website will take you to a Google Sheets document, which is what I've been using to track and to track the changes as we've been going through. I used something similar for SFIA 7, but it wasn't made public. So I've thought, well, actually, this is a really useful way of keeping people informed, exposing, I guess, some of the inner workings. So there's a bit of a risk, but that is available. And what you can see is the status of each of the SFIA 7 skills and where the new skills are coming in. So we can see what's planned for them as a summary level. And then the impact of that change at a more detailed level is on the right-hand side of the changelog. I don't think this will be for everyone, but if you are interested in tracking down what's happened to skills that you use or interested in, or trying to understand the detailed scope of things, by all means take a look. It's a manual process, so there's no clever link from the content on the website to what's in here. So there are bound to be some errors in there. So if you see anything that you don't understand or doesn't make sense, please get in touch, because that would help me as well. So please make use of that if it's useful. And I guess part of the messaging around here is that this is quite a complex activity to keep track of a number of moving parts and making sure that we don't let anything fall between the cracks, and we publish a comprehensive integrated framework. There's within the left-hand side of the changelog, you can see skills which are mainly covered in the blue side. So the blue side talks about readability changes. So their content has not been touched, but we've added stuff for readability. There's new skills, which are obviously new in content and hopefully written in a way that works with our readability guidelines we've done for the rest of the framework. And then ones in the middle where there's some content being refreshed. Some of that may be fairly minor, and some may be quite significant with new levels or skills being replaced. So that'll give you a sense of some of the scale and what the change is and how it's going to be worked through. And then finally, as a way of seeing what the changes are, we had this feature for a previous version of SFIA, but you're able to look at individual SFIA 8 skills, and there's a little tick box at the top left where you tick that and you can see the revisioned text. So what's been removed is in red, what's been added is in green. So that gives quite a visual way, and it works very well where there's very small changes where you might look and think, well, I can't see what's changed, or what's happened there. So for example, if we've shifted a sentence from the middle of the text to the beginning because we want the first sentence to be the really good one, that works out quite nicely. You can see that where there's been a number of changes, it does get a little bit messy. So it works for some, but not all. Right, I want to just spend hopefully just 10 minutes going through the other side that we've got within SFIA. So as Ian mentioned on that evolutionary scale where we started to build into the SFIA offering a broader range of tools and resources and ways of accessing it. Now, some of those have a knock-on effect on new versions, and some of those really help us decide what new versions of SFIA might look like. So I'm just going to expand on that as a way to help you see what else is on the website and what else will be being updated. So as a visual, we have our core SFIA framework with the levels and the generic attributes, things that we recognize as being the essence of SFIA. And we have people who use that. People use it in lots of different ways, and they're interested in different ways to access that. So we have started to build and continue in this area of building an overlay to what's in the core framework. So people who are interested in particular aspects, whether that's a particular aspect of the industry like security, they can find mappings to some of the frameworks that they know and use, or whether they're looking at the concept of views. So at the similar time for SFIA 7, I remember putting slides up where we talked about views, but at that stage they were just nothing more than slideware. They were diagrams on PowerPoint. What we've done since then is build those into the way the website is structured. So those views can be accessed in a similar way to how you'd access the full framework. I've already mentioned the behavioral attributes, the standard roles we've worked on there, where we've been collating examples from different organizations who are willing to share how they use SFIA. Or we've done mappings to standard roles to show that SFIA can be applied to those. And I will give you a little bit more detail how we've extended that and how that can be used with SFIA 8. I think the only area we've not touched on is the searches. So there is some fairly rudimentary search facility on the website, and we hope to build that into more useful ways for people to find what they're looking for. And as the content of SFIA stretches, we do need to make sure we're putting an equal amount of attention in how people access and find the material they want, which is what most of the things on this screen are about. So on here, I've highlighted in yellow some of the areas of interest that we're going to get from SFIA 8. Either they're already there or they're on the way. So the left-hand column is items picked off the previous slide. So I'll just pick out some of the things in yellow. So we've got some of the views already built there, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on a couple of those to explain how they operate and how they can work. We have used mappings as a way to validate and check what's in SFIA. As I mentioned with ITIL, we've done it with some of the security skills like the NICE and the NIST ones. COBIT we've mapped to the BA body of knowledge, a view on what service design is as a skill area. So rather than that just being an analysis piece of work, what we're going to do is publish that. And for example, where we had a mapping of ITIL to SFIA 7, we can now upgrade that to a mapping of ITIL to SFIA 8, and then that becomes a valuable resource for people who use either or both of those frameworks. The related skills, that's proved very useful, and that has been updated for SFIA 8. That's already there. Behavioral factors I've talked about, that document is available now. The guidance notes, so we've now evolving that we've got guidance notes either attached to skills or guidance notes for specific processes. For maybe 18 months or so, we've had SFIA assessment guidelines, so no doubt we will expand that to some of the other areas of SFIA, but the addition of guidelines notes to the skills is a big extension in terms of how people can make use of SFIA. And then the one that I mentioned there is the standard roles. So what we've done, let me do the views first. So the views essentially, this is not how they appear on the website, but this is the best way to show it on a slide, is that for focused areas, so in this case information security, we can reshuffle the skills in SFIA, recategorize them, so it's the same skills but just being viewed in a different way. And as an example for security, not only can we highlight the ones in red here, which are what we might say for the security professionals, but we can also highlight other skills used by roles who may not be security professionals, but where security is a really important part of what they do on a day-to-day basis. So we can pick out, you know, in the important topic of secure software development, you know, some of the skills that are really vital to making that happen, and similarly in infrastructure. And then in the blue area, we can recast some of the skills that we might say are around helping develop skills and capabilities and manage our security people and resources, and put them together in a security practice management set of skills. So the idea being, if you're interested in security, you're running security teams, you know, this might be a good starting point for you. Of course, having looked at this, you might say, well, hang on, where's X, Y, Z? And then you can look at the wider SFIA framework. So it's not trying to draw a hard boundary or limit things. It's just trying to provide an easy way for people to get into SFIA. An interesting one is that as we add more into SFIA, is that maybe some of the roots of SFIA going back a decade or so from, you know, a typical IT organization. And I guess we probably all recognize that a typical IT organization doesn't really exist anymore, but it's quite useful to reflect back and say, you know, if you're saying that's the area that we're interested in, and some of those skills you've added around computational science or skills around radio frequency engineering that have been around for some time may not be directly relevant. So, you know, here's another way of saying, let's start with this, and then I don't need to be distracted with some of those skills that, you know, are probably not relevant to what we do. So that's the use of views. If people are interested in developing further those, you know, get in touch. I think we're going to continue to build those. So views kind of work at a macro level, and if we sort of drill down into more of a micro level, the other thing that people are really interested in, anyone using SFIA will say, you know, what skills do we need for X, Y, Z job? And SFIA does not describe those jobs, has always steered clear of that. And we don't want to put things on the website that imply that there's only one way of modeling a job. The job titles and the scope of jobs is enormous. And that's the work of either people who are implementing SFIA or people who are helping organizations implement SFIA, consultants, practitioners to guide people through that process. But what we can do is to encourage people to use SFIA by showing them that actually, you know, the jobs that they know and love and may not automatically jump out of the SFIA framework can be covered in SFIA. So we're kind of a sort of a loose, light touch approach that says, you know, you can find these in SFIA, but please don't pick these up and use them without thinking about it. So what we've got is an expanding list of common role families and you know, generic job titles to help people do that. We expect that to grow, and the other thing that we've brought this forward, so it's based on all the industry stuff we've had, and saying, you know, here's a collation of what those different mappings is telling us. But it's an ideal way of someone who's looking at SFIA 8 trying to position what some of the new skills and how they might be deployed. So looking at the data science practitioner example in front of me here, we can see we've got data science there, which is a new skill, machine learning, data engineering. You know, those are new skills that are coming in with SFIA, so it just helps put some context around it. So that's available now. There's some blanks in there, but if you take it as intended, it's a start and a thing to get us moving in that space. I'm going to finish now. You'll all be pleased to know. So we have a number of well-loved SFIA documents. These need to be re-looked at with the new content, and there may well be new documents that we think are useful to have. This is a really important area, and we are really open to help in doing this, not least with ideas around some of the graphics and ways that we can put some of this information together. Feedback on whether the idea of a paper or a PDF manual with all the skills in, you know, is that still relevant in today's world? We think the PDF is, but maybe the paper is less so. Some of the material is really useful for people who don't know much about SFIA and want to understand what's in there. Some of the material may be better aimed at people who need it as a detailed reference in their working documents. So we're very interested in building on this area. So, and it's usually a really interesting area to get involved in, where you bring in some of the ideas to life with pictures and graphics and things. So please get in touch. And as getting towards the end, so this is all now published. So if you go to the SFIA website, there's a menu item called SFIA 8 Beta. and the documents are there. So the documents are either things that will be parts of the website, so you can browse the framework online, or there's some of the working documents, which are illustrated here with the Word document of all the skills. We've got every individual skill separated out to help reviewers. The content of those is what's important. When you look at the formatting, you'll see it's very basic, so that isn't the intended format for the final SFIA 8. So please take a look, have a browse around. I am going to organise some people to help me proofread. So if you're willing to help that, it makes sense to do it in a structured way so that we divide up our resources and take on quite a big task in a concerted way. And we would like to organise, as Ian said, some of the themes and key areas to have a bit of a deep dive into. So getting interested people on a call and going through the detail of what's in there. So if there's areas that particularly interest you and you want to get involved in those, again, please let me know. So amazingly enough, I finished about the same time that we did at midnight when we did the one for the Australia New Zealand participants. So over to Daniel.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, and also Ian, for taking us succinctly through our journey and putting together the SFIA 8 beta. Thanks also to my colleagues who've been in the Design Authority, who've been doing a great job in responding to and picking up all the questions. And I can't stress enough that we all really appreciate all the questions coming through in this session. So SFIA is a community developed framework. It's developed by all of us and all of you with your inputs. And so many people have already generously given us a lot of input and a lot of their time to help get us to where we are today. So the most important thing we can ask of all of you is to view and download the beta materials. They're available now, as Peter's shown us. Try it out and send us your feedback. Tell us what's working for you, what looks like it might not work for you, what specific improvements you'd like to make. And if you're keen to help with proofreading, translating, etc., please get in contact via the updates@sophiaonline.org email address. So we'll hang on just for any last questions, but I will just say we'll put a copy of the recording up on the website along with the slides and also a summary of all the questions that have come through and been replied to as well. So look out for that over the next few days. So thanks very much, everyone. If there are any final questions, now's a great time to ping them through. So Matthew, I know you've been picking up a lot of the questions there. Is there anything that you've picked up that we should answer whilst we're all online?
No, I don't think so. I think we've been doing a good job of working through those as we go. Thanks, Daniel.
Excellent. All right. In which case I will say thanks very much to everyone and look out for the recording and the questions popping up on the website over the next few days.